Hello, my name is Rick Gardner. I'm from University at Buffalo. I run the business and entrepreneur partnerships and startup ventures. Just a little bit of background on myself. I've spent most of my career bringing new technologies to market in both small startups and large companies. My office at UB works with companies of all sizes to accelerate growth, build innovative teams, and solve challenges and bring new products to market. Just some background on some of the startup services we have. We have 2 incubators with over 80,000 square feet of incubation space and lab space. We're the hotspot for 11 Western New York incubators. We have a law clinic in the School of Law at UB to provide free legal services to startups. And we have currently around 100 startups in our portfolio, ranging from UB researchers to students to other partner technologies. Our overall goal really is to bring innovations to impact. Today we're going to be talking about microelectronics and the semiconductor innovation and how it requires complex facilities, expensive equipment with specialized staffing, access to networks, and significant investment. Featuring speakers from incubators, national labs, leading industries, and other venture development organizations. This session will explore how to access facilities and technical support systems that can cut costs and reduce time to market. We have a great group of speakers today. We're honored to have Aimee Rose, the Executive Manager Director of Activate, which originated at Cyclotron Road, a division of Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory in Berkeley, California. Professor Grant Warner, the Director of Innovation at Howard University in Washington, D.C. And kicking off our talks will be Jason Ethier, Senior Director of Membership at Greentown Labs in Somerville, Massachusetts, and Houston, Texas. This is one of the most successful climate tech incubators in the country. Prior to his role, he was an integral member of the team that launched Greentown Houston. He leans on experience as the CEO and co-founder and founder of Dynamo Micropower, and he has participated in nearly all aspects of the startup journey, from fundraising to launching product, but regrets being unable to bring his team and stakeholders to a successful exit. He has a passion for helping entrepreneurs tackle the entrepreneurial journey and the skills to support the success they need. Go ahead, Jason.
Hi, I'm happy to be here. Thanks, Rick. You went through my history. I thought it was going to be my opener, but I started my career in innovation, and I'll tell you, I was coming out as a technologist in school and didn't know much, but had a community that really supported me, that helped me grow. And part of that was just being at Greentown. And for me, being able to support founders in their journey is really a great blessing. It's funny, I was listening to Ben at the last presentation. I talked about these hammers and nails and kind of the challenge with climate tech and the challenge with silicon fabrication is you do have this new technology that's coming out to market, and you are bound by physics. And what we're trying to do with any startup and venture capital is identify risks where we can really understand that we're at the right time in the market and invest our time and invest our resources bringing these technologies to market. And sometimes the right answer is now is not the time. And I certainly learned in my business that timing was wrong when we brought in our technology to market. And that's a fair thing to learn. So we talk about Greentown Labs and the ecosystem we build to support these kind of deep J-curve kind of technologies. There are a couple of things we just know founders need to sustain them and to help them be successful. And number one amongst that is community. And it's such an amorphous thing, but this is what Greentown does. We bring people together, create a community of co-founders who are going through that same life cycle so they can share tacit knowledge and really learn how to get to market quickly and efficiently. Now, Greentown, we focus on climate tech. That's different from silicon fabrication, but it has a lot of similarities. There's a deep need for plant and capital equipment, and there's a deep need to find that right product market fit. And so we've learned a lot of these things and apply them to our members. And key here is really building a place to enable collaboration, to bring stakeholders together, talent, be it professional services, supply chain partners, and ultimately customers, the lifeblood of any company. And the reality is the way you do this is bridging connections, bringing real people together. And with any transition in infrastructure like the energy transition, people are deploying billions and trillions of dollars of capital, and ultimately it's people making decisions to invest in other people. So that's a lot of what we do. And, the numbers kind of speak for itself in terms of our ability to affect change with our membership. We're running two campuses now. We got a Boston facility and a Houston facility. This is where we find energy transition technologies are really coming to market. Yes, companies generate revenue. Yes, they generate economic impact. Yes, they raise money. But really, for us, building this community translates into a startups finding that right nail they want to hit, finding that right product market fit. About 88% of companies that come into Greentown figure out what they need to do so they grow on and move out. 12% decide now is not the right time, and they close up their business. And again, that's an important part of this journey is determining if timing is correct for a market. And part of what we do here is really try to shrink that J curve to make sure those members are successful. Some of that's providing lab space within the name, Greentown Labs, be a prototyping space or machine shop. Some of it's just providing software. These guys need hundreds of thousands of dollars of software to figure out how to build that first product, and getting access is a way to bridge the gap as they establish product market fit. There are other services that these early founders need, be it professional services. I'll tell you, one of my favorite service providers, although I love all of them, is agent. Because when you come out of school, you don't know much about insurance. You don't understand. No one gives you a manual on how to address risk. And finding those right partners who can explain to you how you need to apply that to your business, how to make the business decision, it's just invaluable when you're faced with so many unknowns. And so those professional services can really be helpful when being a guide for these early stage founders. We also at Greentown like to provide some bridged resources from academia that helps as companies kind of bridge out, and as they get their own feet under them, they still sometimes need those research resources that they used to have around them, and now as a startup they're kind of on their own. And then the last thing is membership, deployments. Getting a pilot, getting those first products out in the field, and showing a referenceable case study ends up being a big turning point for a lot of startups, and that's a key thing we like to really help them with. So again, Greentown, we like having a lab. We like putting tools in front of people, things that would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, helping them with prototyping. The reality is a company would not go out and build these themselves or maintain them. And I think the same thing is true for silicon fabrication. Tape out is expensive, but it's still a lot cheaper than trying to build your own silicon fabrication facility. And finding the right resources to do those first few production runs is immensely valuable. When we think about a Greentown company, the time where a company is really out of a research environment and they're trying to get some legs under them, we think about our typical member at Greentown. 5 to 10 employees, they've raised some outside capital. It takes a lot of capital to deploy a deep tech company. They tend to be at TRL 7. In my mind, that means a company has a technology, they understand the physics, they're ready to put in the real world. It is not battle tested with a customer. And our hope is over 2 to 3 years, those folks really understand what their customers need and they're able to customize a product. And a lot of that, again, is building those relationships and connections. We support a whole gamut of startups. Don't need to go into the details here. A lot of these industries intersect with semiconductors, which is why there's kind of an inclusive overlap between our two markets, but they're also distinctly different. And I think there's a lot of learnings to be had, which is part of why we're engaging here. The ecosystem and the life cycle of a startup after it leaves kind of the R&D phase has a typical path. I would say half of companies we see kind of go through this. There are competitions, there are accelerators, and then at a certain point, companies end up where they need to incubate. They know what they need to build, and they got to build it. And like I said, a company tends to stay with us for 2 to 3 years, and then we're happy to see them go. Growth and graduation is a key part of their journey. Greentown tries to spread out and help at various phases, but we know our sweet spot is really supporting folks when they're small and when you don't want to take on a lot of overhead, frankly. And so providing those resources allows the founders to focus on their key strategic objectives as they figure out which nails they're hitting, so to speak. Greentown also wants to build community. And so part of the key thing that we do is we bring people together like we are here. We like to engage corporate partners, government resources, investors and the like. Anecdotally, my program manager, when I had an NSF grant, told me that the most number of NSF grants in the country shared our street address because we were all coming out of Greentown. Don't quote me on that. I also think she's retired since then. But being able to secure and execute against a grant is really key for a lot of these startups, and kind of understanding the ins and outs of what makes a good grant application. It's kind of a tacit knowledge that only gets built when you have a community that really connects and works together. One of the other big value adds we've been able to deliver within our ecosystem is engaging with corporate partners. The energy transition itself is a $1 trillion exercise, and capital needs to be deployed. And it's these partners who have an existing customer base, have existing business challenges, and it's where we like to focus getting our members success. That first referenceable customer case is really the turning point for a lot of these startups. Here's one of my favorites with Raptor Maps. And this allows these kind of deep tech companies to point to a success that shows other customers how to integrate new technology. And from there, it's off to the races for these companies. And one of the things we tried that's worked really well is this program called Launch. We work with strategic partners who have a technology field they really want to understand. We develop a 6-month accelerator with them that really gets the two close together. And they co-develop a technology development program. They co-develop a purchase order. And it gets these companies going, and it helps the strategic partner really deeply understand the technology trends in a space. And then for us, the track record, again, is kind of these commercial outcomes for our startups. It's purchase orders, it's JDAs, it's commercial pilots, and it's been a great program for us. We do about 4 a year. We're booked up through the end of the year. And this is kind of like the highest level of engagement that a corporate partner would engage in with us. It allows to go deep, but there are other reasons and ways a partner would work with Greentown. A lot of that is about getting in front of the startups and identifying where there's a fit, building that long-term relationship. And again, so we have these partners we like to work with, and these partners are really deeply engaged with getting the technology in the field. And the most successful partners have an office that kind of matches up and tries to get technology deployed internally. And that's what we find really drives success in these partnerships. So energy transition and any deep tech kind of engagement really requires working with the entire value chain and tackling risk in the right way so that you can determine that timing's right to bring a product to market. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions. Like I said, I'm very deep on climate tech and happy to see how those lessons learned can translate.
Great, thanks, Jason. So there's a question from the audience. Given all the companies that Greentown has supported, what is the one consistent trait or archetype that you see in most successful HardTech founders?
Yeah, there are probably two archetypes that we see, actually. I know that's not the answer you want to hear. There's these folks who come in with deep industry experience, 10 to 15 years, where they understand exactly what their market needs, but they're not technologists. And they understand what the product needs to be, and they're often going out and licensing the technology, putting it to work. Those guys are in and out of Greentown fast. 6 to 9 months, technology risk is low. They're able to validate very quickly. And they have their own experience that we also like to work with these founders who really come out of academia and are technologists, and they really see a change they can make in the world. And they take a little more time, but they also end up building the most impactful companies. I'll call on Ben again. We all like Shreya over at Via Energy. She's one of these classic founders that came out of academia and really just was hungry to learn. And by putting resources and people in front of her, she's been able to take her company to that next level. And you just know she's going to change the world, and that's fantastic.
Great job, Jason. All right, so our next speaker is Grant Warner from Howard University. He's the Director of Innovation for the College of Engineering and Architecture at Howard University. In that role, he deploys campus-wide programming and innovation for students, faculty, and postdocs. He serves as an instructor in the nation's largest deep tech accelerator, the National Science Foundation I-Corps program, which focuses on lab-to-market innovations across the NSF portfolio. He directs the Howard University, Hampton University I-Corps site, which focuses on commercializing university research from historically Black colleges in universities or HBCUs. He's also an instructor at the National Institute of Health I-Corps program, which accelerates the growth of select SBIR Phase 1 companies in devices, diagnostics, and therapeutics. Go ahead, Ben.
Thank you for that. So given the introduction, you can see that my presentation is going to lean towards I-Corps because that's where a lot of my experience is, but also what we're leveraging at the university to improve our commercialization process. So I'm going to start with a quote from one of our faculty that kind of highlights what we think are the advantages of the program. And here she mentions being introduced to the world of entrepreneurship and also understanding the process of commercialization. And we think the big piece of it is helping our faculty understand the commercialization pathway, right? How much they actually need to be invested for this to be successful, and also developing that entrepreneurial mindset, both for the opportunity in front of them and for potential future opportunities, right? So these are the two big things that we hope to pull out of I-Corps. Again, looking at our own processes. So this is pulled from another university at a really great graphic, but I think this is representative of every university process, right? When we think about how we go to impact, we move from papers and presentations to product and processes, right? We have to have a really good process for sourcing innovation on our campus. Make sure we get the invention disclosures and intellectual property assessments, but then you hit the loop, right? This area of commercial assessment, right? What is really worth the growth and nurturing? And that's where I-Corps, I think, can really be helpful, right? Understanding, is there a commercial market? And if so, what's the best path? So we really leaned on that. And again, I think listening to Ben, he said, well, some of the best translation happens when you have an invested tech founder, right? The person who developed the innovation involved. But I think the other part is having them have some understanding of the market opportunity. So as mentioned, the I-Corps is branded as is America's largest deep tech, and using the language for this session, HardTech accelerators, right? Things that have a long development pathway, require a lot of investment, and because of that, becomes all the more important for you to understand product market fit, right? To drive those investments, focused exclusively on engineering, technology, and science-based startups. So certainly there are accelerators all around the country. Appreciated the discussion of Greentown Labs, and excuse that they're not there. I'll make sure to edit that, and they're included. Same thing with Aimee when she goes. But again, when you think about accelerators, it's kind of this cohort-based programming. I think that's a fundamental piece, right? Developing a network for people to lean on. But then you have mentors, people who kind of understand the lay of the land, some educational component and funding, right? So there's some accelerators mentioned there, and I-Corps does all of the same thing, except generally you're asked for equity in an accelerator. Here, you're not. As mentioned before, it's kind of used across the federal agencies. So it becomes a good partner for the university. Again, when we look at, well, how do we help strengthen that pathway from innovation all the way through commercialization? It helps with that commercial assessment, and it's developed for academic entrepreneurs. So the idea is that they're immersed in an environment that they're comfortable with and can begin to understand the language, serves as a bridge to entrepreneurship. I guess the best way to look at it, and the way that I look at the program, is that what it enforces is a structured data collection and evaluation mechanism for exploring the unknown, right? Developing hypotheses, running experiments, looking at the results. So things they're already familiar with, right? The scientific method. So leans very heavily into that. But here, the idea is that you're going to take your initial guesses about business principles, right? Who's the customer? What is the go-to-market strategy? Who might be the partners, et cetera? And let's begin to test those with the scientific method until we get some facts out of the other side. So real fundamental de-risking. So again, just to highlight the point, the big idea is that you can come out of the program with a much better understanding of how to evaluate commercial opportunity. How do you consistently begin to develop the hypotheses that allow you to test elements of the business model, customer need, value propositions, et cetera. It translates your already built-in knowledge of how to run experiments, again, into entrepreneurship, and ultimately allows you to validate problem solution fit and product market fit as you move through the path of commercialization. So all things that are critically important. The one thing that I haven't listed here is intentionally the program is structured to bring in a faculty member and their graduate student. So unlikely that the faculty member is going to be the founder and leave academia, not as unlikely that the graduate student might be the vehicle to help commercialize this that the university might license to. So the structure of how you go through I-Corps is intentional. Again, trying to figure out, kind of what is the most likely commercialization path. And so quickly, these are some of the key stages, as you think about a spin out from the university, making sure you understand problem solution fit, product market fit, what's your go-to-market strategy, how might you scale and do fundraising. And the I-Corps programs we run locally and feeds into the national program are both shown here. So we run local programs that say, hey, do you want to dip your toe into evaluating the potential of your innovation? Let's see if we get people who are committed to the process. Can we begin to find some initial markets and partners that might make sense for this? And if so, then you might go to the national program. Well, you move beyond discovery, hopefully closer to full validation. We build around that some, again, easier ways for people to involve just with seminars, right? So we target one to graduate students that says, hey, why don't you kind of learn about this other professional pathway that you might not have thought about? You tend to think about entrepreneurship or academia. Maybe you could merge both of them, right? So try to bring them in for professional development. And that leverages some work that we've done with GEM to increase inclusion in I-Corps. So GEM is a scholarship network that provides fellowships for Black and Brown students to pursue master's and PhD in technical fields. We've run some programs with them to increase participation in I-Corps. We've taken some of that and use it locally. We also run a separate program for faculty, again, to serve as an introduction, just to begin to think about how do we develop mindset and understanding for the things that you might need to do that helps the university commercialize your innovation. And that was developed in partnership with Jackson State and Hampton University. And again, the core goals are to make sure that they understand the pathway to commercialization, begin to develop an entrepreneurial mindset. Again, that's the culture you'd like to develop on campus to give higher chances of success. So again, kind of at a high level, some of the goals that we look to articulate is make sure that they can articulate a business hypothesis. That's our local program. Develop a deeper understanding of the program. That's our local program. But for their participation in the national program, it's beginning to understand the ecosystem that your innovation might need to be integrated into, right? Really critical. Understanding whether or not there's desirability to launch a venture, both looking at the market opportunity and looking at your individual component. Again, is your graduate student interested in launching a startup? And there's a decent percentage that are. And of course, thinking about, well, what's the pathway forward? Some evaluation that helps the university, right? So we think that this could be licensed to a spin out, or maybe the opportunity is with a partner entity that we identified through customer discovery. Maybe we should stop. There's no market there, right? So things that help figure out what make for the best investment or the best stewardship of university resources. So bringing starting to land the plane, just have some actual feedback captured from some people who participated in the national program that I think highlights some of the strengths here. kind of the first quote talks about their entry into the program as a specialist and feeling like they already had the answers, only to understand by talking to the market that yes, there were some gaps, right? That there might have been things that they did not know that impacted both the technology and the market. The second one talks about understanding customer needs instead of just technology, right? There might be things that are important to understand that you might use again to adopt your path to market based on what you learn. The third quote talks about the acceleration, like how much you learn in such a short period of time. Again, time is money, and thinking about how resources are stewarded, very important, right? So having some of this acceleration component is important. It's called the game changer here. And the second one, again, reinforces that point, right? We completed tasks that would have taken months over the course of weeks, right? They wouldn't even have been possible. So again, I think when we think about the deep tech, hard tech founders who are coming from a hard technology background, how do we quickly get them up to speed so that they're an asset to the commercialization process, even if they don't intend to launch the startup itself? And this is kind of what some of these examples highlight. So, again, some quick parting thoughts. So federally funded technology has been at the foundation of many public companies. Google is one that comes to mind. So continuing to nurture development at the university, really critical. Technology commercialization is becoming more important. In addition to SBIR, which is an important program, there are other models that you can lean on that help that process, I-Core being one of them. And the path from the current state without any emerging innovation. So no one in particular, but just thinking about any innovation to the future state where that innovation exists, right, is the basis for research and discovery, right? Use-inspired research, et cetera. So we need to have researchers understand that there's a pathway that they need to follow, along with some skills they need to develop. And part of that is that entrepreneurial mindset. All right, so that's it in a nutshell, and I will stop sharing there and open up for questions.
All right, thanks, Grant. So first question from the audience. Other than graduate students and postdocs, which can be hit and miss, where else can I find business-minded entrepreneurial leads to carry my new venture forward? Are there any good models out there to consider?
Yeah, it's a good question, and this is something that's wrestled. So one of the natural places that you might think about is in the business school with MBAs. That has had some hit and miss. There are some programs that were built around that. I know at one point, FedTech was one program that was built around that. But sometimes those types of entrepreneurial leads struggle with understanding where they can pivot to. So I think having peers of someone who is that business-minded person with someone with technical understanding is kind of the best mix.
Okay. So another question was, how important is I-Core if I don't want to start a company right now, but I still want to see if my technology can be commercialized?
Yeah, I would say it's still important. There's no obligation at the end that you launch the company. I think what happens though is you get a much better understanding of what the needs are. And so we've seen very successful teams go through the course only to find out that, well, what I thought was a need is not a need. And I'm going to go back to the lab and make some refinements, right? Maybe I apply it to a new grant. The one comment that I didn't show that maybe I should have that comes out consistently is that what I've learned is going to change my approach to research moving forward, right? So it opens up a whole world of new opportunities. So I think it's part of a 21st century skill set, much more than just how I launch my company.
Very good. All right, one more question. How can HBCUs or minority serving institutions that are interested in doing more hard tech commercialization but don't have any experience learn from Howard or other schools that are more developed in this space?
Yeah, fantastic question. So we run a program, or we participate in the program. I don't want to say run because it's Jackson State, Howard, Hampton, called the HBCU I-Core, where we invite all HBCUs or MSIs to participate in one of our regional programs. And again, it covers kind of this fundamental skill set development. Also allows you to connect with a network of people who are participating in this regularly. So again, anyone who wants to reach out to me, g_warner@howard.edu, I'd be happy to talk to you further about that.
All right, great. Good job. All right, so we're ready for our next Next presenter, that's Aimee Rose, Executive Managing Director at Activate. She earned her PhD in physics and chemistry at MIT, developing materials for explosive detection. She transitioned to a materials startup, Nomadics, and led product development through an IPO and 2 acquisitions. The resulting systems were deployed in Iraq, Afghanistan, and airports worldwide. She's then served as the founding Chief Technology Officer at Advanced Fabrics of America. She defined and built an investment portfolio to transform fibers and fabrics into high-tech, high-value products to revitalize the U.S. textile industry. In both these roles, Aimee witnessed the critical role startups play in commercializing high-risk, high-reward technology. She was afforded the opportunity to focus on the essential ecosystem and joined Activate as the Boston's program founding director, where she mentored technical founders in turning their inventions into products and services that benefit the nation. Take it away, Aimee.
Thanks so much. Super honored to be here and speaking among this group. I think a lot of the previous speakers set me up for success in talking about technical founders being very well suited to navigate the ship along all the ups and downs and pivots that the first few years of a startup holds. And our program, we operate a 2-year entrepreneurial research fellowship program, and really designed around supporting that first-time technical founder build a business based on their technology. And so as a member of the broader ecosystem that you heard about, you can think of us as somewhere in between I-Corps and Greentown Labs. There's plenty of overlap in the time horizons of our fellows, but once you figured out what you want to build, and what the market needs, how do you build a business to begin to monetize that technology? We were founded in 2015 in Berkeley, California, and have supported 74 companies to date. 96% are still active and gone on to raise about $370 million in follow-on funding, which kind of translates to 14x leverage of the initial investment into a fellowship. And it's also, startups are an amazing economic engine for the country in terms of job creation. So our companies have gone on to create 360 US-based jobs. And the competitive advantage, hard tech is hard. It's really hard, but it has some upside, which is that it's hard to duplicate. So it gives you some sustainable competitive advantage, but it also is physical. You're making and producing eventually physical goods. And so that engenders a whole bunch of manufacturing jobs related to the production of those goods, which also serves to further develop this country's economy. We have been working for a few years now with DARPA specifically, and in collaboration with MIT Lincoln Laboratory and Lawrence Berkeley National Lab, supporting first-time technical founders in microelectronics. So we do have a few learning cycles around what it takes and some of the hurdles and bottlenecks related to getting your microelectronics invention onto the market. One thing I'll just start with, the mindset shifts we were talked about earlier is a really important thing. Technical founders are amazing at being first-time CEOs, but the important thing to say is like a lot of the skills that you need to be a good CEO can be learned. And our program was really purpose-built to develop those mindsets in those learning cycles. Very important that people, learn to covet, feedback and advice. That's a huge piece of the entrepreneurial journey, is really being comfortable not knowing everything and getting help from those around you and your network and your connections. And, that you got to start making decisions a little bit based on incomplete information. So you're not going to have the perfect answer, but you have to go with the best answer using your strategic and analytical skills. There are many challenges that young startups face. So, this is still the best country in the world for basic science based on how much we invest every year at the university level. and the best country in the world for entrepreneurship. But there's a gap between those two worlds that, our program is one of those that was designed to address. There are particular challenges related to the microelectronics space in general. A lot of the value chain has gone overseas, right? And so talent pools are overseas, subject matter experts are overseas. And, as the pandemic recently highlighted for us, that lack of expertise can really impact the rate that these companies can grow. And, it is a consequence of offshoring a lot of the manufacturing capabilities. It's not just about making something overseas. Eventually, the expertise ends up growing and outgrowing you there. Microelectronics in particular, there's highly consolidated industry where very few players kind of dominate the product adoption scopes in the course of innovation. And so even if you're 10 times better, that might not be good enough because you really have almost no control over the market forces. Of course, the long cycle times of prototyping and the infrastructure that's required is definitely another bottleneck, but there's also the fact that you end up competing for talent with some of these really giant players like Google and Apple. So, with a bachelor's degree or master's degree, students can come out of school and get really high quality, high paying jobs. And as a startup founder, you need to kind of convince somebody, no, like leave that big paycheck and come work for me for some equity that might be worth something someday. And so part of that is definitely a challenge to growth. And of course, fabrication facilities can be risk averse. So really, if you need to develop a new tool or a new process, it takes a lot of time and a lot of convincing and a lot of the right relationships to actually get that done. The ability to connect startups with existing national infrastructure in the way that Activate does by embedding these entrepreneurial research fellowships in national lab facilities. We have a lot of anecdotes that kind of tell us that these companies wouldn't exist if it wasn't for our fellowship program, but it's kind of a hard number to quantify. Really, the fact that most of our companies are still in operation is somewhat of a testimony to the impact that we can have in getting first-time founders on their feet and pointed in the right direction and set up to raise follow-on capital. This is a model we've been growing. So Boston was the first, the N=2 experiment, I would say, after the Berkeley program had been operating and learning in California since 2015. We just launched two new communities this year. One physical location in New York and one virtual program, partly inspired by COVID, called Activate Anywhere. And these programs are really designed to address what we see as a bigger need than we can currently serve. So if you think that there's 40,000 PhDs in STEM fields graduating every year, as an example, or 17,000, patent disclosures that end up getting filed every year by universities, and you take a small fraction of that and say, okay, that's a compelling invention and there's a technical entrepreneurial champion behind it, you could get to a much higher number in terms of the talent pool that's available to start commercializing some of these technologies than we can currently serve today. So while we'll be taking in probably 36 or so fellows in our next cohort in 2022, I think the potential is much, much higher. And so, we have ambitions to scale. And because of the fact that there's just a lot of value that's left on the table with respect to all of the money that's gone into basic science and all of the inventions that come out of it. There's a few other things to mention around what startups would really benefit from. In addition to our program and the other resources, I-Core is a huge resource. Greentown Labs and other physical infrastructure are huge resources. But there's other types of innovations that startups would benefit from, and on the policy side. Some of these technologies can have impact, but they're not aligned with VC VC funding expectations. So what are those more progressive government funding models that allow companies to get to their first pilot that aren't going to require them to convince a bunch of investors that might take them on a different path? You know, the fact of the matter is, like, vast majority of hard tech startups are acquired. And so what are the tax incentives we could give big companies in this country to acquire startups at an earlier stage? Whole process a lot easier. And of course, shifting just a small fraction of the basic science budget to translational programs like ours would allow us to get to kind of the scale we think is necessary to really capture the full value of what we're investing in basic science. There was a whole session earlier on university licensing practices, you know, aligning incentives of licensing offices with that startup success that don't require taking capital out of that startup when it's very expensive capital because it's very early days, is a great way to start thinking about setting these companies up for success. The Cornell Tech Runway program has a really interesting approach to this. And immigration reform, like, we can't ignore the fact that 50% of our grad students are coming from overseas, temporary visa holders. And this is especially the case in microelectronics. It's closer to 80%. So we need to import talent to serve our basic science investments, but then we train them and send them back home. And the path to staying in this country is much rockier for people who are looking to found a company. And so what's the type of immigration reforms that we can implement that gives these first-time founders the opportunity to stay around a little longer and give it a go at commercializing their inventions? And with that, I think I'm close to time, but happy to take any questions.
All right, I have a few questions for you. First one is, what do you think is more important, having a super strong technical founder or a strong business founder? I know both are a combination of both is ideal, but if you had to pick, what would you pick?
I think it depends on the stage of the company. So if you're talking about right out of university, there's a patent that's been filed, but there's a clunky kind of benchtop prototype. I think some of the speakers spoke about this earlier, but there's still a ton of technical risk. And you really can't even understand how to serve some of the customers you're approaching unless you understand the technology. And, you know, I'll just reemphasize that, like, you can teach the entrepreneurial business side to the right type of people, the right mindseted people. And so it might feel opaque and mysterious, but these are skills that actually can be trained. And then there are later stages in a company's growth where it makes perfect sense to bring on a senior executive that's maybe scaled something similar in their career and is looking to embark on their next thing.
Okay. Next question. What is the most common technical barrier you see for startups, even if they're venture back, in scaling hard tech innovations like microelectronics?
Microelectronics, it's kind of all over the map because it depends on exactly what they're trying to do. But it's kind of that access to talent is a huge thing. Like, how do you build a team when a lot of that expertise is overseas? How do you find the right place? How do you convince a fab to try a new process is huge. And then just the cost of every single iteration cycle, every single technical learning cycle, you have to be pretty careful and pretty strategic about what you choose to fabricate because you only get 1 or 2 shots on goal. And so making these types of user facilities more accessible, more affordable, maybe subsidized for startups or some other type of economic incentives aligned with that startup success is a way to make some of these bottlenecks a little bit more streamlined.
Okay. One more question. What can industry players in the microelectronics do to support talent development pipelines like Activate?
Be advisors to our companies. That is a huge piece. Happy to pull anyone in and chat with them about supporting some of our companies and other companies I know operating in this space. The advice and the expertise and the market knowledge is huge. None of them are doing this alone, and just come in and roll up your sleeves and get involved. And there's obviously, strategic corporate investors as well that are investing in technologies that are aligned with a particular business's, business objectives. That's definitely a pathway we've seen be successful. but also just having the right person on the other side of those relationships that's willing to dig in and help that company get to the next level is really priceless.
Great. So those are all the questions for Aimee. So we'll wrap up this section. I think one of the things I heard over and over again is the importance of understanding the market need, understanding what the customer needs. And I also heard several times that being open-minded and coachable is also a very important aspect. So great job. This was a great session.